identify with the smaller aspect of what we think we are, our ego, we stay in a low energy, low vibrational state. In order to lift that vibration and lift our energy so as to reach those higher states of consciousness, we need to figure out a way to stop identifying with that limited self to solve our problems. If we want to reach those higher states of consciousness, then we need to identify with the truth of what we are, that greater divinity that is not limited, but limitless. I've often said that everything in spirit is effortless. So in today's video, I want to give you a reminder, something that you can use every day, all day long, to help you remember to get into that effortless place that puts you in tune with this more expanded version of yourself. But before I begin, if at any point you find that this video is helpful, then please like and subscribe so more people can benefit from watching this video. What do we know to be true? One of my favorite spiritual teachers and authors, Byron Katie, wrote a book called Loving What Is. She created a method through self-inquiry that asks you, that invites you to question what it is that's true about what's going on in your life. To distill her work into one question would be to ask, is that true? Or can you absolutely know that that's true? Nothing is too devastating or off limits for her to use this method of self-inquiry. For example, if someone came to her and said, I hate my husband. I hate him so much. I hate him because he doesn't love me. He doesn't show me any love whatsoever. To summarize what happens with this work is that everyone gets to a point eventually where they realize that it's their judgments, their misperceptions about what is, that's causing them all their pain. The other question that she ends up asking the person is, who would you be without those judgments? And they end up realizing that if they let go of the judgments that they have about this person, they feel free. They feel the very thing that they're wanting to feel, which is some form of liberation and freedom from the suffering that they're having. One of the first mystical experiences that I ever had during meditation was where I felt this incredible sense of oneness with everything. What I realized when I was in that profound state of feeling at one with everything was that there was absolutely zero judgment within me. There was nothing that I could possibly judge. It was as if that ability was gone completely. And the issue that we have as we perceive with our visual perception, with our senses, is that we are always constantly in a state of judgment. But when you start to tap into these other senses, this one eye of spirit, you begin to see without division. The biggest takeaway that I had was that it's our judgments that create separation. Judgment is the fastest way to separation. And being in a state of non-judgment is the fastest way to oneness. The ego is never content. If you catch yourself in a state of feeling that you're always wanting something, that there's always something more that you need, whenever you're in that state, rest assured that you are identifying with your ego, because it is always in a state of lacking something, because it's identifying with something that is limited. In truth, you're not your body, you're not your thoughts, you're not any of these physical things. You are part of God. You are part of the infinite. You are simply here having a human experience. You have the ability to rise above this identification with this lower aspect of what it is that you think you are. What the ego does is it creates problems because it is a problem. It is a problem when we think we're something that we're not. Ego is just mind stuff. It's just creating more and more problems for you. And this state of dissatisfaction that the ego is constantly in is there because it has preferences. It has likes and dislikes. And these are all self-created. They're just made up ideas that it thinks that it needs to solve this inherent problem of separation. It begs the question, what do we really know about anything? What do we actually know what any of this is for? What is a tree for? What is a flower for? What are my fingernails for? Yes, okay, we can come up with obvious answers for what we think those things are for, but we don't actually know what any of this is for. When you get into that state of thinking that you know what you need, of being upset that you haven't gotten your way and what you want, the thing to realize is that you don't really know what anything is for. So why would you know what it is that you need? Instead, what we need to do is attune ourselves to that state of humility. Being in a state of humility is the fastest, most effortless way to remind yourself of what's really going on. You are here temporarily having this human experience, and you get to be a part of experiencing all of this. How fantastic is that? In the snap of a finger, you can release this stronghold that you have on your identification with this small self when you sit in that state of being humble. You are actually reminded of how vast this universe is, how infinite it is. Oh yeah, this little problem that I have, this teeny tiny little problem, no matter how big it might seem, is really very, very, very small. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Rekindle the magic. I've talked about how important it is to get back in touch with that inner child, with that fun-loving, spirited, curious version of ourselves that we were as children. One of the most beautiful qualities about a little child is that because they haven't developed this strong sense of themselves yet, they don't really have such a strong sense of separation. And because of that, they're naturally humble. They naturally want to play, and they're curious, and they ask questions. And the amazing thing about children is that they find everything exciting, especially children who haven't been exposed to a lot of social media or TV. They can be playing with a stick or a twig or running around the room for no apparent reason, giggling. And as adults, we absolutely do not do that. Well, most of us. Adults have become so desensitized to these subtle aspects of life. And so it takes bigger things like getting married or seeing a concert or jumping out of an airplane. But when you get into that state of humility and you remember how vast and how magical and how incredible everything is, then you effortlessly find the beauty that is right in front of you. Boredom becomes a thing of the past when you show up and you're present and you realize that you don't know everything. Then everything can start to come to life around you. Life becomes infused with that magic again. The same magic that you had when you were a child comes back. So humility, getting into that state of not knowing, is powerful. Everyone is special. This concept of specialness is a very large part of A Course in Miracles. So if you really want to dig deep into this idea of being special, of feeling special, of having this need to be special and seeing others in that way, then you might want to read A Course in Miracles. Essentially, the core of that teaching is that everyone is special, which is another way of saying no one is. This is a key component to understanding humility from a spiritual perspective. It's tough for the ego to relinquish this need to be special. The ego has to feel special, or else its identity shatters. And this, of course, goes to both ends of the spectrum in terms of feeling either better than someone or less than someone. I could say things to myself like, well, I have a special needs daughter and I'm going to be changing diapers for the rest of my life. And she's never going to talk and she's never going to be like any of the other children. My life is horrible. How am I going to find enough money to support her at the end of her life? Those are the kinds of thoughts that one has when we feel that our problems are worse than everybody else's, or at least worse than someone else's. On the flip side, there's the obvious one of, I'm special. So and so is fine, but they don't have what I have. I have this very special talent. I have this way of being, of speaking, of making a YouTube channel that's better than everyone. Those thoughts are equally as self destructive and equally putting us in that place of identification with the ego because it makes us feel special. Every single one of us is part of that cosmic consciousness. So, how could any one part of that whole be special? Know thyself. The most important thing is to get to know yourself, to get to know what it is that you really are. And that is simply not going to happen when we are deeply entrenched in this identification with a limited, small version of ourselves, of identifying with our bodily senses. I hope that you can stay in that state of being humble, of reminding yourself constantly throughout the day that you don't have the answers, and that is perfectly okay. That's true humility. I love you all so much. Until next time, remember to let go. Let go of trying to be anything other than the truth of what you are.